Hi, everyone. I'm Nicolette Richer, CEO and founder of The Green Mustache, where we have 6 locations that serve an abundance of organic, plant-based, whole foods, real food that's not processed, comes straight from the garden. We turn it into beautiful salad soups, cold pressed juices, smoothies, desserts, and we strive to make you healthy as medicine. So I'm so excited to be here today because we have Howard Straus with us. And for any of you that haven't heard of Howard Straus, he is the grandson of Dr. Max Gerson. But this isn't an interview about Dr. Max Gerson. This is an interview about the force of nature, his grandson, who is an incredible man doing incredible things for for almost 75 years. We're going to let Howard get into all the wonderful things that he's been doing. And as many of you know, the whole entire reason I started the Green Mustache was because of the Gerson Therapy and learning about the Gerson Therapy and the power of plant-based food, real food, clean food to be able to heal the body of cancer and chronic illness. Now, I've been doing this work for about 10 years. 10 years before that, I was in the environmental sector, really focusing on the planet. And then I moved into human health. And here we have Howard Straus, who's going to talk about his adventures in the world of using food as medicine as well from his perspective. So thank you, Howard, for being here with us today. It's our first day ever with Richer Health Consulting, actually doing one of these Facebook Live, Be Live TV interviews where we get to connect. I feel like I'm in your office. You might feel like you're in mine. And we get to share our conversation with the world. So thank you for being here.
It's a great honor. Thank you very much for having me, Nicolette.
Great. So why don't the beginning? Because I'm really fascinated. Father, but I love the fact that you actually lived with a Max Gerson and your grandmother as well, and went to the Waldorf School in New York City.
That's right. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was just on a kind of a borderline, and I was just almost too old for the previous grade, and I was not quite old enough for the next grade. So they put me in the 2nd grade, and I was ready mentally. I was ready for the 3rd grade. And so, and no matter how much my mother begged and pleaded, policy is policy in New York. And I went into the 2nd grade where I was bored out of my skull. I was spelling at the 5th grade level when I was in kindergarten. Okay.
Wow.
And I was bored out of my skull. So, my mother said, okay, I went to a Waldorf school when I was in Kassel, Germany. And I know there's one here in New York City. I'll take you over there. So she took me over to the Waldorf School in New York City, and they gave me some tests and math and reading and everything else, and I scored way above grade level. And so they said, yes, well, we could put him in the 3rd grade, and we'll put him in the 3rd grade, but I do want to warn you, he's not quite emotionally up to snuff. And if you think he can handle it, we'll do it. So I went in the 3rd grade. So I skipped a grade right there. And so I was in the 3rd grade in Waldorf School, where I learned how to knit, and I learned how to recognize Greek letters. So we would read Winnie the Pooh in Latin.
Wow.
Winnie the Pooh, right? And we would read stories in English, but with Greek letters. So we got to recognize Greek letters. And there was the knitting and weaving and eurythmy and all kinds of, fun stuff. I mean, this is fun for a kid. This is not school. This is fun, right? And I went through Waldorf School until the 6th grade when, because my parents lived out on Long Island, and my grandparents lived 4 blocks away from the Waldorf School. So I lived with my grandparents for several years while I was going to Waldorf School, and then spent weekends with my parents out in Long Island. but then they wanted me living with them, so they put me in a school, a day school closer to their home, and it was just a school. It was a good
Yeah.
school, but it was a school. And so seventh and eighth grades, I went there, and then
Yeah.
that Waldorf school started a ninth grade. It started a high school, and so they started that just before I got to ninth grade. And so I went ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades to the Waldorf school,
Yeah.
and from there I went to MIT.
Wow. So for anybody who doesn't know and hasn't put the link together, Charlotte Gerson is Howard's mother. Okay, so that's who he was talking about when he said that she had gone to Waldorf school in Germany. So, you know, and Howard, you know, I have 3 girls, and my husband was also a Waldorf teacher, and my 3 girls go to the Waldorf school here in Whistler. So we know the struggles that exist in Waldorf schools when there's, you know, not enough space for high schools. And so we've been creating here for the last few years, and I'm so grateful that the school now, their first graduating class actually graduated 2 years ago, and I think there was 2 or 3 students that graduated in grade 12, and now this year I think there's going to be about, you know, hopefully about 10 kids that graduate out of the Whistler Waldorf School. So it is a growing process. I just want to ask you about that, because we are going to dive into what you did after Waldorf. You know, that, you know, you were, you know, I'll give it away that you went to MIT, and you know, your grandfather Max Gerson was a bit of a genius, right? Like, he could have gone into almost any field he wanted to go in, and he chose medicine, which back in those days, like 100 years ago, more than that actually, when he was graduating from med school, but you know, it was kind of looked down upon to choose medicine back then compared to like going and becoming a historian or a physicist or any of the other things that he could have been at that time. But I've heard him, the fact that he's been considered, you know, a genius of all areas. And I think that genius definitely has translated through to your mother and as well to you as well. But the one thing I want to tell
Dr. Gerson was acknowledged by not only his math teacher at gymnasium, the high school that he went to in his small hometown, but when he answered an exam question in a way that the teacher didn't understand, the teacher sent the solution to Berlin, to a mathematics professor at the University of Berlin, and the professor said, "Wow, this student has figured out a new way of solving this problem, and he's a genius. He ought to be a mathematician." And of course, you know, when the family considered it, they considered the prospects for a young Jewish boy in Germany, unfortunately Jewish, and they looked around and they saw no university professors who were Jewish in mathematics, none. And they said,
Wow.
well, you know, that's sort of a dead end. Where, you know, the most you can ever be is a gymnasium teacher, a high school teacher, and that's you know, we want more prospects for you than that. And he had also shown a propensity for healing and for taking care of things. When his friends were injured, you know, in play, he would be the one to bind them up and to tend their wounds. So they said, "What do you think about medicine?" And he said, "Okay, why not?" Because he was fine with medicine, and he could literally choose anything at all. And so he went into medicine and became this beyond genius, where Albert Schweitzer called him the most eminent medical genius ever, which is pretty stunning when he should have gone into mathematics to begin with.
Right.
And then when he came to New York City, while he was studying English, because he didn't speak English, while he was studying English, he invented the jet engine.
Wow.
He was never acknowledged for it, but he drew out the principles for a jet engine.
Oh my, well, he was studying English just on the side table. And plus while he was healing people of chronic illnesses and cancer at the same time. Okay, so let's get back to you and Waldorf. And now we'll ask you this afterwards, but as we draw what it's like to live in the world when you've gone to Waldorf school, because it's kind of like the world that you're in with plant-based medicine, where it's an old concept, right? Learning Waldorf is like teaching and educating the entire being of the child, and plant-based healing and whole foods, real foods healing is also about, supporting the whole entire body. All systems are connected. So after Waldorf, okay, so where I'm sure people questioned your parents' decision to send you to Waldorf, they probably, I'm imagining, thought that it was a crazy concept.
No.
And why would you send your kids?
I mean, who was going to really question them? I mean, my grandparents, excuse me, they sent her to Waldorf school.
Yeah, no, of course. But the general public, like we even have it here where people think like it's a religious school, or that it's just all play and there's no career.
It may be all play, but that's a wonderful way for children to learn, isn't it?
Exactly, because they really internalize it, and it's conceptual and in context, and it educates the whole entire child. So here you are, you graduate from the Waldorf School in New York City, and then where do you head off to after that?
Well, then I dived into ice cold water.
Oh.
That was like, I mean, the Waldorf School was a warm embrace, and MIT was like ice cold water. And that was a huge awakening. I'd never experienced anything like it. I mean, Waldorf School made learning fun. MIT was the most difficult thing I ever had to do in comparison with my capabilities, and it was just overwhelming. As a matter of fact, even after I graduated MIT, I was relatively mediocre average at MIT, which is not a shame, by the way.
Yeah.
After I graduated MIT, I had nightmares about that education for at least 10 years afterwards.
Oh,
it was like post-traumatic stress disorder. It was unbelievably difficult for me. But having gone through that and having survived it, nothing else in my life has ever been as difficult.
Right. And sometimes it's going to push us to those levels. And if we can survive it in a healthy way and get through it, then, it teaches us a lot for sure. You just actually made me realize, I'm like, why isn't there a Waldorf University somewhere? Like, maybe that's what we need.
Oh, there is.
Really?
Yeah. In Sacramento, near Sacramento, there's a Waldorf University. Absolutely. For Waldorf teachers.
Right.
You bet.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So for people who want to become Waldorf teachers, they can go to wow. Okay. That's amazing. So you went to MIT, and what did you study there? Nuclear
physics.
Right. Okay. Now, what made you want to go into nuclear physics?
Well, mathematics was just too esoteric and abstract. Right. Being a Waldorf student, I was much more interested in stuff you could pick up, hold, look at, drop, and break. Whereas mathematics, it all took place there. There was nothing you could ever touch. Engineering was a little too close to the real world, where all you were dealing with was, like structural members and stresses on bolts and things like that. And it didn't appeal to me at all. The first and closest natural science to mathematics where you could actually touch something was physics.
Right.
And so I thought that appealed to me.
Now,
so that's what. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to jump in and say, so after living with your grandparents and living with, Dr. Max Gerson, where I know you told me stories about how you'd be at the dinner table and patients would show up, and, you regularly discuss coffee enemas at the table, same thing that we're chatting about coffee enemas and my kids just rolled their eyes. Now, had you ever considered medicine at all?
No, I hadn't. My grandfather was very interested in me becoming, following him into medicine. Mm-hmm. But I, at the time, my understanding was only that you'd spend your days around sick people, and that didn't somehow that didn't appeal to me as a 15-year-old. It just I just couldn't wrap my mind around it.
Right.
I didn't have any idea of the massive genius I was living with.
Right. Okay. And also, you didn't realize that you would eventually end up helping people anyway. Like you keep.
No, I was focused on technology,
Right.
and
Okay.
science.
Right.
So I continued on with, at MIT with the physics, and then physics led me to need to use computers as a tool, and computers turned out to be a lot more fun than physics because that was instant gratification, and you could actually do something with it, whereas physics was evolving more and more towards astrophysics or particle physics. And once again, it was devolving into something that I could never touch. Astrophysics, you're dealing with things which are a million light years away. Yeah. And particle physics, you're dealing with things that have a lifespan of, 10 to the minus 10th seconds.
Right.
Impossible. So that was, that was kind of out of my Waldorf mindset to begin with. And so I went into computers, which was kind of fun. It was like playing all day long with my mind, like solving puzzles. Which I like, and my mother and I used to go up into middle branches of high oak trees of a summer Sunday afternoon, and do the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle. That was, and to this day, I am addicted to the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle, which I now do in ink, and I'm disgusted when I can't finish the whole thing.
Right. So I want to talk about when so you were, because I want to get a little bit into just knowing what it was like for you growing up, going through Waldorf. Now, your mother, Charlotte, she, from what I understand, she was quite sick actually when she was a young girl. And so her dad, Max Gerson, put her on the Gerson therapy essentially, which he was still, unraveling and discovering. This is correct, right?
This is when she was 12, because of his constant contact with tuberculosis patients, and because of the fact that they were at the time, that by this time they were Jewish refugees, not living in their own space, not eating their own food, not having a whole lot of control over their own environment. So she actually contracted bone tuberculosis in her right leg. Just below the knee, there was a hole in her bone. And at the time, that would have been a fatal disease because that was before antibiotics. Yeah. But Gerson was quite well versed in curing tuberculosis. He just made sure to keep her on a very, very strict Gerson therapy. Yeah. And her tuberculosis healed up just fine. Now she's 96 years old, so that's 84 years she survived that, and she's still going strong.
Now, your sister, Margaret, she just told me a funny story about how, they live in Italy and they live in this beautiful community. They actually have someone who juices it for them and helps prepare their meals. And she was mentioning Margaret was mentioning how her husband came in the other day when somebody had baked them these homemade cookies, but they're not a Gerson cookie. And so he came in and he's like, oh, do you want to taste this cookie? Because, it's so delicious. Come on, Mom, you're 96 years old. Like, of it, and you can just have half a cookie. And she's like, do you want me to be half dead? Like, she is such a strong woman.
She takes no prisoners.
No, she doesn't. And, and it's funny in this world where people, they're looking to heal themselves. Sometimes they hit rock bottom and then they find the Gerson therapy and then they choose to do the Gerson therapy because they realize it's the only thing that's going to actually heal them, right? The medications haven't worked, the surgeries haven't worked, and they're still really, really sick. And even when they're doing the therapy or they heal from the therapy afterwards, they're like, so how long am I supposed to eat this clean, real food from? And I just think it's so amazing that your mom won't even take half a cookie, and she's lived on this therapy her entire life, pretty much since she was sick, right? when she was young?
No, since before that, because when she was a little 3-year-old, she would go bouncing around in the backyard. My grandfather had his office in the front room, and the family lived in the back of the house. Sometimes one of his patients, one of his farmer patients, would look at the diet that he was prescribing and say, "Well, how can a person live on this?" As you've heard, I'm sure. How can a person live on this? There's no meat. There's no protein. How can they live on this? And he says, I want to show you something. I want to show you someone who has lived on this her entire life without any break. Has lived on this her entire life. Lottie! And he would call back to the backyard, and she loved this. She loved to be summoned in from the backyard and come in all dirty from, playing in the dirt and everything, and bounce on Daddy's lap. And here's this robust little 3-year-old, and he'd say, this is someone who lives exactly as I'm telling you. How does she look? Does she look healthy? Does she look like robust and full of energy?
Oh my! And this is in the 1920s. That when
she was born in 1922.
Right. So this is like 1925, and now it's 2017. And he was, advocating this beautiful, nutrient-rich, toxic-free, plant-based predominantly diet back then. And, people are still having that same conversation that this gentleman had, right? Like, can you live off of this food? And she's lived on it for pretty much 96 years of her life.
Absolutely. And that's, that's how she has always lived. So, and like me, but here's an interesting thing. We both know, both my mother and I know that we have very weak constitutions. We are not genetically strong. I'm not a Viking.
Right.
I come from
5 or something. 6'4".
I'm 6'5". Yeah.
6'5". Yeah, and you're not a Viking though.
I'm not a Viking. No.
Okay.
My wife is a Viking. So she can live eating this stuff and and survive. I can't. If I eat the way my wife eats for so much as a week, I'm ill. I can't do it. So my mother and I both know that we have very weak genetics. She had migraines when she was a child. She had tuberculosis when she was a child, and she should have died, right? I have kind of a hereditary anemia that my grandfather was always trying to feed me stuff for. I grew up on liver juice when I was 10 years old.
Right. Yep. Nice. I grew up eating liver as well. My mom used to cook liver and onions. Yep.
Yeah, well, but here I am, and so I know that I have to take care of myself much better than those people around me do, because they're stronger than I am, and if I don't take care of myself, I end up sick much faster than they do.
Right. But you are 75 years old now, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you look incredible.
And in the best health of my life.
Exactly.
So everything works. My joints all work. My brain works. I hope you think my brain works.
Your brain is brilliant. I always love chatting with you. I can chat with you for hours and learn so much from you. Your memory is phenomenal as well.
My brain works. My joints work. I'm fully functional. I'm nowhere close to sitting in a retirement home.
No, and you're 75 years old, which is not what a lot of 75-year-olds can say, because we have now a society where people are hitting 30. I work with some of my clients who are 27 years old, and they're needing hysterectomies because they have endometriosis and fibroids that are so terrible that they can't even function. They can't work, they can't ski, they can't play, they can't really do anything. And so, even if you have a weak genetic constitution at 75 years old, though, you are vibrant and healthy, which just goes to show that, the power of eating the way that you have. And I'm going to get you to describe what your diet is like. And I want you, in your words, I want our audience to hear what the Gerson Therapy is, because people like to, think about the Gerson therapy, and then they're like, oh, I Googled it, and, there's no way anybody can live off of this, or it's just quackery, or it's, there's no way it works. My doctor's never heard of this. But at the end of the day, it really is just food, like clean, real food. So you've lived on this clean, real, plant-based protein foods, that organic diet. I'm assuming you always purchase organic? Only organic, right?
I mean, it does not make sense to purchase other types of commercially grown product, because it's what I would call food, PHUDE,
Yes.
which is like, it sounds like food and may look like food, but it ain't food.
Right.
It's not food. It's PHUDE, food, right?
Yeah.
So in reference to what you were saying before about me having weak genetics and still being strong, well, I consider genetics the hand you're dealt.
Yeah.
You can't change your genetics. You were born that way. You have a certain amount of spirals and various things in your DNA, and that's that, right? But your health status is the result of how you play that hand.
Right.
So if you are stupid in playing the best hand of cards in your life, then you're not going to win the game.
Yeah.
But if you're smart in playing a mediocre or even poor hand, you can win. And that's my basis for life.
Awesome. So with can you summarize? I want to hear in your words, and I want our audience to hear in your words, because you've lived it your whole entire life. Your mom's lived it her entire life.
Oh, wait. Not my entire life.
Oh, not your entire life. Tell me about that then. I want to hear about that.
I went off to college.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't listen to your mom when you're in college, do you? No, you gotta find out what beer tastes like. You've got to, you gotta have steak with the guys, right? No, come on. You gotta have fried chicken when everybody goes out for fried chicken or pizza or something. Yeah. And I wish to heck that I had not, because if I had lived like this instead, even if it had been possible, right? If I had lived like this, my brain work would have been a lot easier than it ended up being.
Yeah. And I did the same thing too. When I was in high school and I started making my own pocket money, like from babysitting and working part-time jobs, I would live to go to the vending machine. Like, I thought the vending machine was such a novel concept, because I'd only grown up on plant-based foods and organic foods from farms, and my mom always had a garden. She always cooked from scratch. I think the only time I had processed food was when, at one point, clearly my parents probably didn't have a lot of money when the interest rates raised to 18% in the early 80s, and we had powdered milk. That was, but it was for such a very short time, and I remember just how bad my mom felt. But she was always chopping vegetables and making everything from scratch. But when I got into high school, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get those ketchup chips and Diet Coke and Score bars. But for me, who had always been such a healthy kid, I ended up breaking out in acne and then having terrible PMS, and I was like, okay, this sucks. I can't. And then I just went back to eating clean, real food by the time I hit about 17, and then from there on in, I've always been knock on wood, incredibly healthy. So yeah, I wanted to know, so when you were growing up, obviously with your grandfather, you were eating clean, real food, Gerson style. And then you went off to MIT, and tell me about that experience eating that food.
Well, then I started eating, the standard American diet with my fraternity brothers, and I didn't know the difference about how my brain would have been working had I been eating properly. Yeah. So I just did the best I could, and I ended up pretty mediocre, but. And then I got married to a wonderful cook. She was a gourmet cook, and she made the most wonderful dishes, and I gained weight, and then I went into the Navy, and the Navy sure doesn't feed you that way. So and then so it was many years in between that I was not paying attention.
Right. Okay.
And I put on 40, 50 pounds, and I started losing my hair in clumps, and going. My drain was always clogged up, and I had adult acne. Yeah. various different things. When I met the woman I am now married to, my wonderful wife, we just celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
When I met her, we just had a wonderful time. She was also a gourmet chef. She just a feeder. She just loved it, and so I was, not doing all that great as far as physically was concerned. And then we decided to get married because I thought this was the lady I'd like to spend the rest of my life with, right? And we decided to get married. And 3 months before our wedding, she came down with her third occurrence of skin cancer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Third. Okay. So recurrent.
Yeah. How did she treat it the last 2 times?
Well, she had surgery once, and she had surgery a couple of times because they caught it early, but she still, they caught it. She still had cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And now she had a lesion on her ankle, and it was skin cancer again. And she's a blonde, and she has, her mother was a nurse, so everything got treated with antibiotics or trips to the doctor. And yeah, she had cancer the first time when she was 24 years old, and the second time when she was 25. And here she was 42, I think, and she got it for the third time. And that was not good. That was not good. So what do? And here's the lady I'm about to marry. I'm crazy about. And do I take her to a regular doctor? No, I know what they do. No, of course not. I don't take her to a regular doctor. Do I walk away? No, this is the lady I decided I wanted to weld my life to forever. So no, you just have to walk right straight through it. And so we do what I believe in and what we do as a family. I took her down to my mother's clinic in Mexico and put her on the therapy. And in the middle.
Describe the therapy here, in your words, what the therapy is. So just so the readers who don't and listeners who don't know anything about Gerson Therapy and they're hearing this for the first time, they get to know what it is.
Everything, all food is organic, salt-free, fat-free, and fresh, unprocessed, no canned, bottled, boxed, anything. It's all fresh and organic, salt-free, fat-free food. Vegan,
yeah.
Which means no animal products, whatever. No milk, no eggs, no cream, no ice cream, no nothing. Right?
Yeah.
And 13 fresh pressed juices every day. So every hour a new juice appears, and you have to drink it before you put the cup down. You do not put a cup down with juice in it. Right. You want it as fresh as possible. So that one of the staff at the clinic would rap at your door and say juice, and you open the door and she hands you a juice, and you must drink it right away. And nice. my mother, when she was sitting consulting with patients, and she would see a patient put a juice down on the table, she would never let that patient forget it. The patient would never do that again.
And I remember Charlotte came down to the clinic with us when I was doing my training in the Gerson Therapy, and I got to see her in action at the clinic. She would drive herself in this big Cadillac or something like this, across the border, the Tijuana border, and into Mexico, and go to the clinic. And then her and her robust feistiness, that woman is the epitome of grace and power. She's incredible. And she would go in there, and I saw her interact in the kitchen with the chefs, telling them what to do and making sure they were doing it right. And, talking with the patients as well. And they would ask questions like, well, can't I have just a little bit of, and she'd be like, absolutely not. It was amazing to watch her in action. There's no, you eat organic, plant-based, clean foods, non-processed 100% of the time. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And that woman,
unless you want to die And if you want to die, I'm wasting my time here.
Yeah, and in the training, I remember one of the students said, well, what about Celtic sea salt and Himalayan crystal salt? And she's like, is that sodium? And they were like, well, yeah, it's sodium, but it's the good sodium. And she's like, there is no good sodium. The good sodium comes from your food, and it comes from like the vegetables that you eat. You don't need to add any extra stuff. And she was like, only if you want to die would you eat that salt. I loved it. It was great. And we haven't had salt in our kitchen in 10 years.
Sodium is the class of substance it is. It's a poison. It is a poison. It's an enzyme inhibitor, and that's another word for poison.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really important for a guest to understand, when we're talking about salt, we're talking about sodium. We're not talking about potassium, magnesium. Like there's lots of different salts, and our body needs, a little bit of sodium, but it can come naturally from the food that we do eat. Nature has made it put it in perfect balance in our food, but we need high amounts of potassium to sodium. So don't get your salts confused, okay? So at the end of the day, the Celtic sea salt, the Himalayan crystal salt, it's still sodium chloride at the end of the day with minerals, but you can get your minerals from your food, which is sodium.
And sodium is bad enough. But remember, you said something else besides that, what salt is made of.
Yeah, sodium chloride.
Chlorine is also a very dangerous chemical to have in your body. Chlorine attacks your thyroid.
Exactly. And we live in a society where, every single one of my clients comes to me on thyroid medication, on Synthroid, and they don't get better. It's not like they get off their Synthroid, like they just get their dosages increased and their thyroids are shutting down. And and I know Max Gerson recognized that early on, that, with his patients, he saw that they had underactive thyroids and that they were quite sick from that. But getting them off the salt for sure and switching over that plant-based diet would restore the natural process of the thyroid.
That's right. It does.
Yeah. So then you went off to
so we went so there's the 13 juices a day. Yeah. There's the 3 big vegan meals served buffet style, so you can eat as much as you want, because after all, the food is the therapy.
Yeah.
So and when people have a chronic disease, they have a chronic disease because they are not only toxic, which we talked about with salt and other poisons, but also they are deficient. So they're starving. Their bodies are starving. And so they don't recognize it, because when they arrive, they are also so toxic that they don't have much appetite, because they're just toxic. Yeah. But when you start cleaning that toxicity out, and that's 5 coffee enemas per day, 5, or more if you need them. When you start cleaning that toxicity out, then suddenly this mask gets removed, and they can see this huge yawning gap of their nutrition, which they have, they have not fed themselves. They have not fed their needs. And so they have this huge yawning hole in their nutrition, and they experience that as incredible hunger.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that with my clients, like especially clients who are, let's say 60-ish and above, and they're just like, oh, I just need my banana and my tea and biscuits for lunch. Like that's all they eat. They're not eating anything. And they say, oh, I'm not hungry. I don't need very much. But it's actually like their brain has told and their gut has told their body, like, don't eat. We don't have the energetic capacity to digest food. So just don't put food in me. Like it's almost like they're so weak that they can't handle food. So their brain just says, don't eat. But then 3 months into the therapy, I love watching it happen where they're like, they've got this massive plate of food. And like, this is not eating like the birds, people. Like these are big plates of delicious, amazing food. And they're just like, shovel, can I have another bowl of soup? It's awesome to watch their appetites come back and their digestion kick in, and they actually move the waste out of their body and move the food in. It's like really fun to watch that happen.
I ran a clinic in Sedona, Arizona, and I remember one patient in particular. She was a small little lady from Cincinnati, Ohio. She was maybe in her 50s, and she had breast cancer, and they had done all kinds of operations, and they had reconnected muscles here and there that weren't functioning. So she was a mess, total mess, and she was eating nothing. She was, she weighed 100 pounds, maybe soaking wet. Yeah. And she came in, and the first couple of days she was not doing too great. She was not liking the food, and I don't know. And she started getting detoxed. And suddenly she became the black hole of Calcutta. She would go back and she would take as many plates of food as she could until they finally closed the buffet and took it away. Yeah. And then as they were closing it down and taking it away, she'd snag a couple of baked potatoes to take back to her room.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. And so your wife was down at the clinic here, so the clinic in Mexico, and she's eating this food. Is she enjoying the food? Because she hadn't
my wife.
Your wife, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was, you know, she knew because she knew that if she rejected that, she was rejecting a huge basic part of me. Yeah. And I probably would reconsider marrying her.
Right. Now that's a strong statement. So she stayed at the clinic for how long?
She stayed at the clinic for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then we came back home, and she did it. She did the therapy perfectly.
Yeah.
For the next 6 months, and in the middle of which we got married. That was 28 years ago.
That was 28 years ago. So clearly her cancer went away. Like her body.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Came back up, attacked the cancer, got rid of it, and she's been thriving.
Yeah, she's been thriving ever since. And every now and then, I mean, she's kind of drifted back to, you know, some of the things she enjoyed, like wine and fish and so forth. But a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago, she noticed that there was a lesion on her arm. Mm-hmm. And she went to her dermatologist, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's basal cell carcinoma. Mm-hmm. We can do a little operation, and as soon as we get clean edges or clean margins, right, you'll be okay." Mm-hmm. And when she heard the word clean margins, she knows what that means. That means it just keeps expanding, right?
Hacking away at you. Yeah, trying to get rid of the cancer. Yeah.
And her eyes went like that, and she said, I know exactly what I have to do. And she did it. And a month later, she went to her dermatologist. It was gone.
Amazing. And you know, that's what I love is how fast the body heals, right? Like the body's just like, give me good stuff and I'll heal myself, right?
Absolutely. Look, you know, all of us, every single one of us alive today is the end result of 1 million years of evolution and survival of under the most difficult conditions possible. Earthquakes, fires, floods, wars, plagues, tsunamis, etc. Donald Trump, you know. So, so we've survived, and long before there were doctors, long before there were pharmaceutical companies, and our bodies know how to do that. Given the vast array of things around us, the body knows what to go after to heal itself. It knows. And it's way more powerful than we ever imagine. Way more powerful, and it does things powerfully and quickly, all by itself. You don't have to stimulate the immune system. It's there. It's raring to go. All you have to do is give it fuel. It's like a Ferrari. If it's sitting there with no gas in the tank, you're not going anywhere. Right. But if you put the right fuels in and the right lubricants in, it's going to leave everything else in the dust. And that's exactly the way our body works.
Now, the thing is, okay, so I went back to school 6 years ago and I did all my pre-med science courses because I was just so fascinated by the Gerson therapy. And, you know, and I definitely, like, I was writing papers on cancer and agriculture and soil depletion and nutrients back when I was 19, but I didn't really understand it. Like, I was looking at it more from prevention, not from a curative, like, let's heal the body after it's been disease, you know, after the disease has manifested as cancer or another chronic disease. So, and almost 20 years ago, a friend of mine also, he was 72 at the time. He was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, prostate cancer. And, you know, they'd given him about 3 months. And he said no to the chemo, the radiation, the surgery. And he went and did the Gerson therapy. And, you know, that was 22 years ago or 20 years ago. You know, and he was thriving like that whole entire time, eating this amazing food. So now, you know, fast forward and here we are. And I know your grandfather was, you know, pretty much having these same conversations 100 years ago, and your mother all throughout the last, you know, 96 years as well. And here we are. So you must encounter people all the time. They don't have a science background. They don't have any knowledge about how their bodies work. Like we're still discovering things about the immune system now that we had no idea about. Like we just discovered 3 years ago that we have spiders living in the pores of our skin, like these little tiny arachnoids, male and female. And, they can't get out of balance. And if they do, then you get things like rosacea and skin issues. So like science, I often say to in workshops and to my clients, like, are you going to wait for science to catch up with us? Like our bodies know already what to do, but just because we haven't proven it, does that mean you wouldn't want to just put clean food into your body? So what do you say to people who, just don't believe that food is medicine and that food can heal cancer and reverse cancer and stop cancer? Like, how do you interact with these people? And it's something I struggle with all the time.
If I can't, if they don't want to believe me, then why are they talking to me in the first place?
Right.
And if they really don't want to believe me, and if they really want to pull in and use as authorities the people who admittedly can't cure cancer, right, and who have proven over and over again with them that they can't cure their disease, then if they really want to believe them rather than me, all I can say is bye-bye.
I know. And that's the hard part for me is that
it's not hard for me at all. It's, everybody has a right to die the way they want to die.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's really true. And it was hard for me, I should say. Now I definitely, because I have so many people coming all the time to me, I'm just like, you know what, like I can share this with you. You can do it or not do it. And a lot of people, they wait till they hit rock bottom before they do something like this. But really it's only been 100 years of treating our bodies so poorly with this, industrialized packaged processed food. Like we didn't live this way, in the late 1800s, like when, our grandmothers used to go out into the garden and pick vegetables and wipe them off on their apron and then, make shots of potato with a cheese grater and just food was medicine. And it always has been for thousands and thousands of years, like millions of years. And here we are now where, to us, we think that pharmaceutical drugs is medicine when ultimately they're based off of plant science, like all the pharmaceutical drugs, anyone that's ever been created is actually created. It's a synthesized version of what already exists in nature, which is so sad.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like that. So you just say, you know what, move on and you go to the next.
I wish it were that benign. It's not. The pharmaceuticals are specifically formulated to keep us sick, to make and keep us sick. Because that's where the money is. The money is in treating disease. It's not in curing or preventing disease. I mean, think about it. Think about the value proposition we're giving doctors. Here, if you're a doctor and I say to you, if you keep me healthy, I'm going to make you poor because I'm not sick. I'm not going to visit you. Right? Same thing with the pharmaceutical companies. What do I need your poisonous drugs for if I'm healthy? If I'm
Go on.
If I'm slightly sick or, the kind of average sick, and I visit the doctor 3-4 times a year with a cold or I sprain an ankle or I cut myself or something like that, he's going to make a decent living like an automobile mechanic, right?
Right.
So if you keep me slightly sick or if I'm slightly sick, you'll earn a decent living.
Right.
But if you have cancer, if you have cancer or heart disease, you need a heart-lung transplant, right? Or you have high blood pressure and you're going to need this pill the rest of your life, right? Or you have ADD, ADHD, right? And you're turning your child into a zombie, right? Now they're going to get rich. Because you're going to be back in their office every week, every 2 days, getting a new dose, getting a new exam with a new pain, with a new something or other. So if you keep me very sick, I'll make you rich. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the value proposition we give doctors. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And the pharmaceutical companies are really the ones that benefit hugely. But this is a great segue. So into China, I want to take our audience into China. So you went to Waldorf, you went to MIT, then you went into the Navy. You were into computers and coding and programming and all of that in the Navy. And then after that, so you've had this robust life, and then tell me, so after the Navy, what happened after the Navy?
I had a 40-year career in computers after college. First I worked at IBM, then I went in the Navy and worked at my local Navy base, a weather facility, a computer weather facility, predicting weather and ocean conditions and so forth for naval operations. And then I went out into Silicon Valley and became a contractor, a computer contractor. And I worked in that industry for a nice long time until that kind of came apart after 9/11.
Yeah.
And I had to find something else to do with my life.
And then, was that when Gerson Media started, or?
I'm sorry?
Was that when Gerson Media started?
It was after that. It was considerably after that.
Okay.
So then my mother said, nobody's ever written a biography of my father, and it's been 50 years, and the people who knew him are sort of dropping off the edge of the earth. I know she was thinking about herself. And you might want to. So I'd like to subsidize you to write your grandfather's biography.
Which is a brilliant book, by the way. Everybody needs to get their hands on that copy. We sell it at the Green Mustache. You can buy it online. But I suggest getting it through Howard Straus directly. And we'll provide links at the end of the show. But it is a brilliant book. So tell us more about that biography and of your grandfather and what that was like to write it.
So my grandmother had written just a sort of she had written this sort of a 70 or 80 page biography of his life, which double-spaced, typewritten, and she's not a researcher. Mm-hmm. She just lived with the man, and lived with this brilliant man. And so she wrote this biography and titled it "A Life Without Fear," and nothing ever happened with it. But my mother had it, and she said, "Here, I have your grandmother's outline, and maybe you can write his biography. I'll support you while you do that." Wow. All right. Well, I'd never written a book, and the reason I went to MIT rather than some Ivy League university is because I did not like to write English. I liked math, Math, you could tell when you were right. Computers, you could tell when you were right and wrong. I mean, bang, like that. Hard evidence, right? With English, you never know when you're finished.
No.
You never know whether it's good or bad. Well, you sort of know whether it's good or bad. And I know some wonderful some writers that my mouth waters when I read their stuff. But I'll never be like Faulkner. Never.
Oh, I struggle with the writing as well. If you could just get into my mind and take it all and just do whatever you want with it, great. But to put it into words in the English language, it's like my biggest struggle. So good, yeah, that's amazing.
I said yes, I'll do it.
That's incredible.
And of course, writing a biography of this amazing, brilliant, hugely productive man. Who went through World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, immigration to the United States, battling with the Rockefeller Foundation, the AMA, his colleagues, and eventual assassination. That was a little more than just a 6-week proposition. That was huge.
That is huge. Like, it's a movie like that, and I know that there is a screenplay that's been written now for the story of Max Gerson, and a film's going to be made, which is incredible. But yeah, that man is like, his story needs to be told to the world for sure. And so you took that leap to write this this memoir or biography.
And it was painful. It was painful too, because seeing this wonderful, gentle, brilliant man who all he wanted to do was heal people and alleviate their pain and alleviate illness and get them well and functional again.
Mhm.
uh, and all that his colleagues could think of to do was to assassinate him or stop him somehow, or make him into an enemy, or something inimical to him. And you say, why? But why? Here he had the answer. He's willing to give it to everybody,
Mhm.
and they were saying, "Don't you dare, you quack!" Right? What?
And which this happens in history. If we look in history, we see this happens to all the greatest minds ever, like whether it was Galileo to Dr. Terry Walls, who cured herself of MS, to, the leading neuroscientist in the 70s who were considered quacks, but now everybody's like, praising the words neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And, it's the biggest, greatest thing, but they considered those early founders, right? These futurists of their time, are all labeled quacks when the masses can't get on board with what they're saying and don't even take the time to consider. So yeah, no, I can't even imagine what you, Margaret, Dr. Max Gerson, went through trying to teach and help people with the basic concepts like that food is medicine. It's just, yeah, that must have been quite a journey writing his biography for sure.
It was very painful, but the more I watched his courage and his perseverance in face of that, the prouder I was to have done it, because this was an admirable man. This was, for Albert Schweitzer to call him the most eminent medical genius ever, that's going some. A Nobel laureate,
And he wasn't just saying that from, knowing the man. He actually, Dr. Max Gerson taught him the Gerson therapy, him, his wife, and his child, I believe, and all of them healed. Isn't that correct? They
That's
all
right.
did the therapy to heal themselves of these incurable chronic conditions. So
right. Schweitzer's wife, Helena, was she had lung tuberculosis. His daughter had something nobody even knew what it was. It was that rare. She just had thousands of little lesions all over her body. The hundreds would open every day. Hundreds would heal. My mother was there when, helping her to wrap and unwrap the dressing twice a day.
wow.
And my grandfather didn't know what it was either. But the Gerson therapy cured it. The body knew what it was, and the body could fix it. And then Schweitzer himself had, age onset diabetes, type 2 diabetes, mellitus. And here was a man with 4 PhDs and brilliant books in each of those disciplines: medicine, religion, music, and philosophy. And he was unable to work. He was unable to move. He was dying at age 75, I think. 72. 72. And he went to his friend Max Gerson and said, "Can you help me?" And Gerson said, "Certainly, easy." And he put him on the Gerson therapy, and 6 weeks later, Schweitzer was back working in his jungle hospital in Lambarena, and then 3 years later, he won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, and he could easily have said, no, this, what a lot of people do. They're like, food is medicine, forget it. I don't believe it. I'll just take the drugs and then end up facing those dire consequences of things like death.
Except he had watched Gerson cure his wife and his daughter of incurable diseases that he had gone everywhere else for.
Yeah, but nobody else could help with. Yeah, and at the end, they turned to food.
That's right. So he trusted Gerson. They were lifelong friends, correspondents for their whole lives, and they Schweitzer lived into his 90s after being on deathbed at age 72. He lived into his 90s, so another 20 years, working hard and productively.
Yeah.
So,
which we all could be doing. We don't need to be dying these long, painful, inflammatory lives. We could be living vibrantly and then dying just nice and short at the very end, which would be, which is what I think most people want.
Well, the proper way to die, the way that your body is built, is you go to sleep one night and you don't wake up. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wrote this biography and got it published, and then I worked a little more in Silicon Valley, but that no longer had a whole lot of attraction for me. But then I also I went to San Diego, and I acted as public relations person for the Gerson Institute for my mom, and arranged lectures and travels and venues and all kinds of things for her, and traveled with her, and got to know the spiel, right? Yeah. Got to know the lecture that she did, and she would give me sections of the lecture to take and sort of break me in, and eventually I and that's when I founded Gerson Media and Cancer Research Wellness Institute, and started to publish my own book. And then my mother's book was the Gerson Therapy, and she had written it with a man named Morton Walker, and it was published by Kensington in New York City. And when Mother started to find a few errors in it and wanted to correct them, and she wanted to update some of the recipes and some things. I mean, the Gerson Therapy isn't static. As she found things out, she wanted to give those to the patients. And this was our flagship book, but Kensington said, no, we just want to sell paper. So they didn't want to correct anything. They didn't want to update. They didn't want to nothing. They just wanted to sell paper. Mm-hmm. So she said, what am I going to do? I can't give that book to patients. It's not right as it should be. And yet we don't have anything else. And I said, well, maybe you should write another book. She said, but who will publish it? And I said, well, I'll do that. I can publish it. And I looked around and I said, who said that? Who said that?
Sometimes you're compelled to just do these things. You've never done it before, but you just have to bite the bullet and go do it.
My grandfather. It was my grandfather. He gave me a little push right like that in the back.
Love it.
I'll do it. So then I became a publisher, and I had to find out all about that. And I published her books and my books, and she eventually wrote another book with Beata Bishop, and that's the book we now sell. Yep. And
called the Gerson Therapy. Called the Gerson Therapy. Right?
Healing. No. It was healing the Gerson way.
The Gerson way. Yeah. Healing the Gerson.
And that book has been translated into thus far 15 languages. The Swedish is about to be published. The Russian was just published, and the simplified Chinese is coming up in a few months. So that'll be almost 20 by the time that's done.
20 different languages for one book.
Yeah. Even my book has been translated into a few languages. So, wow. Here's one that's really strange. You see this?
Which language is that?
What does it look like?
Oh gosh, I want to say Hebrew, but maybe not.
Nope.
Arabic, of course. Yes, I don't know my languages that well. I only speak.
This is from Kuwait.
Wow. And your book's been translated into many different languages. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
Japanese.
Yeah, incredible. And it's food, people. Like, that's what they're writing about, is food, and teaching people all over the world how to eat clean, real, organic, plant-based food, vegan food, so that you can heal your body of cancer and chronic disease. You can prevent disease, you can reverse disease, you can stop it in its tracks, you can undo the damage that's being created by disease. So this is when you were talking earlier about medical doctors here in North America that are essentially, like, they get paid when people are sick. The more people are sick, the more they get paid. But you just came back from China, where the book was translated in Chinese, and you were over there speaking to government officials. Can you tell us about that, and tell us about your trip, and also tell us about the medical system over there? Like you were telling me earlier when we were chatting, how doctors actually get paid when their patients are healthy. So yeah,
Not anymore, and then that's not anymore. But they used to be. Okay, but there's two things where they have a great advantage in China. Number one is they have 5,000 years tradition of traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, and that is healing diseases using herbs and plants and stuff that grows around you. Acupuncture, acupressure, all kinds of natural means. So they and conventional allopathic Western medicine has only been around for 100 or so years. Mm-hmm. So they are very inclined. They're predisposed to accepting that nature can heal. That natural means can heal. So I'm not talking into a vacuum. I'm talking to people who have a 5,000 year tradition of natural healing, and they're looking dubiously at a 100 year record of Western medicine.
Right. So tell us about your trip there and what you were doing there. Can you tell us about your trip and what you were doing in China?
Right. I was invited to China by a woman who, a Texas-educated attorney, who lives in Beijing. She's a Chinese citizen. Her husband and family live in Houston, and she lives half the year in Beijing, half the year in Houston. And she was tired of being an attorney for financial industry and making tons of money and feeling empty, and so she started looking around at healing and health, and when her research eventually led her to the Gerson Therapy, her head exploded, and she said, "This is it. I've got to be part of that." And so she founded a health organization, a health company in Beijing, and they run seminars much like you do. They run weekend retreats where people get to sample eating good food, detoxifying, and how good it makes them feel. And so several of the people I met with over there had attended those seminars, some of them more than once, and were just delighted with them. The thing is, the people that I met with that had attended these seminars were deputy director of the Chinese Centers for Disease Control, like the CDC, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
In charge of chronic and non-communicable diseases. Wow. So when I told him about the Gerson Therapy, he had already experienced 2 of these workshops, and he was 100% on my side all the way.
Right.
And he wants to introduce me to his boss. And then a top TCM, traditional Chinese medicine oncologist was, and his wife, who is a professor of pathology, right? I was telling them about it, and he said, years ago I did pick up the Gerson Therapy. I found it quite interesting. And then for some reason, I don't know why, I put it aside, and I haven't thought about it since. But he said, I'm re-inspired.
That's amazing.
By the way, this was a funny one. This guy could have been my great grandfather. He looked like it, right? Yeah. And his wife, and the 2 of them together were, pretty badly wrecked. And in conversation, we were talking, and I discovered that she is 1 year older than me, and he is 2 years older than me.
Oh my goodness! They need to do the therapy. They can shave off 20 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So this is the Gerson Therapy too, right? Because what we experience as aging, as normal aging, right, is really premature aging because of what we do to our bodies. Because we don't have to be this, we don't have to look or feel this old. We don't have to die so young if we take care of ourselves, because the body will heal itself. So it was pretty amazing when I was telling people how old I was over there. I would often see this in the audience, like 100 people in the audience. I'd see 5 or 6 or 8 people go like this. Their jaws drop.
It is
It
the
was
one thing
great.
I love so much about the Gerson therapy is it really it you know, you shave off years of your life literally when you switch to it and you do the therapy. Like people look 20 years younger sometimes when they're doing it, when they're like in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And then when they're, you know, 40s, 30s, it's amazing. They turn like, they look like babies again. Their skin is supple and soft and they lose wrinkles. And, you know, I've seen it do such incredible things like moles and skin tags fall off of you. You know, they just like disappear. Like it's pretty incredible what it does. So, you know, if any reason, you know, a lot of people like to do stuff because they like to do it to number one, lose weight, and they like to do it because they want to look younger. And really this is, you know, it does both of those things. If you have weight to lose, you'll lose it. If you have weight to gain, you'll gain it. But you will look younger. You'll feel lighter. You'll feel so like amazing. It's incredible what it does. It's better. There's not a single beauty product out there that can make you look as young and alive as the Gerson therapy. That's for sure.
And you know, beauty. What are beauty products really? They're paint, right? You're painting a picture of what you would like to look like on your face, which is probably not in that good of a shape.
No,
right?
Exactly.
Plus, which those products themselves are highly poisonous.
Yeah, and that gets into your system.
Unregulated. Okay. Yeah. So they have phthalates in them. They have alum in them. They have neurotoxins. Yeah. They have carcinogens, and what's worst is they have mutagens in them. You know what a mutagen is, right?
Yeah, mutates your DNA.
Causes birth defects. So the irony is that the stuff that women paint on their face in order to attract a mate and make an offspring is the same stuff that will damage that offspring.
I know, it's incredible. And with the infertility rates now that we're seeing as well, like I've, you know, done incredible. I love following Catherine Alexander's work she's out of Australia. She's been teaching the Gerson therapy for about 30 years as well. And she works with so many women who can't get pregnant at all. And it's amazing because once they get rid of the beauty products, get rid of those household toxic cleaning products, get rid of the toxic food, and they start eating this incredible real food, what happens is their reproductive systems like snap back and they become alive and awake. And even though they were told they will never have babies, like they're not able to produce an offspring, all of a sudden they're pregnant like within 3 months. Like it's incredible. And then they, you know, and that's happened to clients of mine before where they like, I can't have babies. They do the Gerson therapy. And, you know, one of my clients has a 4-year-old now. Another one is pregnant. She's 6 months pregnant, you know. And so, you know, my feeling about that is that, you know, when your body's not healthy, why should you produce a child? Like, why produce an unhealthy being into this world? Nature has its way of shutting down that process. So your reproductive system is the first one to shut down, right? It doesn't have enough nutrients to support life. So therefore the baby just can't, you know, implant itself and grow really. So it's amazing what it does for people who have fertility issues as well. But that those cosmetic products, all that beauty products that we're trying to keep ourselves young and alive, it's not working when we use it topically.
Because we're masking it. We're not keeping ourselves young and alive. We are painting on a simulacrum of young and alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But again, there's no money to be made in carrots that you know, chew and digest. You know, there's not a whole lot of money to be made from that, but there's a heck of a lot of money in the cosmetic beauty product world. So it comes back to that same conversation about, you know, where is the money to be made? And unfortunately, it's just not that sexy marketing a bag of potatoes or, you know, something like that.
there was, you know, the thing that, you know, I don't know. I wish sometimes I wasn't like this. I go to the supermarket and I look at these, you know, magazines for young women, 17 and Glamour and, you know, those things, right? And you see these blindingly beautiful 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds looking out of the magazine cover, and I look very carefully, and all I can think of is toxic bag of poison.
Yeah.
Because
I did the same thing.
You look at their eyes. You look at their eyes, and their beautiful blue or gray eyes the iris has a ring of dark around it. And so it looks intriguing. It looks intriguing. Ooh, interesting. Blue eyes with a dark ring around. Oh, that, really interesting. But what that dark ring is it shows how toxic their skin is, the periphery of their body.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and with models, of course, who have lots and lots of makeup, right? Yeah. And you see that dark ring on the eyes, and you're thinking, oh God, that young woman is going to have such problems by the time she's 25. And you can't do anything about it. Because you tell a girl in Los Angeles, oh, you don't want to wear any makeup. She'll talk to the hand, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And, but what I'm finding that's really incredible is I have younger and younger clients coming to me, which is actually, it's sad in a way because they're sick and they have these diseases that really they should not be getting until, or ever, if ever, but usually they're adult onset diseases that come in when you're 60 or 70, like really the diseases of the elderly. I mean, you're 75, but you're not elderly, in my opinion, at all, Howard. So, but, you're the epitome of youth. But, these young kids are coming. But what I love, we teach workshops in high schools and to elementary school students, and these kids get it. And they're picking up the phone after the workshop and telling their parents, okay, we're only eating organic now and we're not eating meat anymore. And, and they get it because they don't want to be living on these drugs and they don't want to be sick and they don't want to have arthritis at 21 years old and, diabetes at 22 years old and MS at 23. So I think there's I'm hoping anyway that there is a movement. And unfortunately, it feels like it's only coming about because these young kids, some kids as young as 3 years old that are being diagnosed with, adult onset diseases.
Well, when you consider that, years ago, the number one killer of children was accidents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And not even all that many years ago. Now, the number one killer of children under 18 is cancer.
Yeah.
And cancer used to be a disease of degeneration and age. Now it's a disease because people are so deficient and so toxic that they're getting it at 4, 5, 10 years old.
Yeah, diabetes, type 2 diabetes at 10 years old, and MS at 10 years old. It's astounding. So here you are. Okay, let's go back to China because here you are talking to these health officials, and I'm just trying to picture myself in Canada, having Trudeau come to our retreat center and stay there for 6 days and do coffee enemas and drink cold pressed juices and eat plant-based, beautiful cooked meals. And I would love it. And he can take that back to Parliament and see the changes we can make in Health Canada here. But what I find though is that I know you mentioned in one of our conversations, that we had before, just about how there's this perception that Canada is, progressive because we had Tommy Douglas who created this socialized medical system. And you're from the States, where socialized Medicare has not been around. And unfortunately, people have to pay through the nose for their healthcare. But what I find, though, is
Stop.
Yeah.
I will not. I refuse to discuss it as healthcare. It is not healthcare. It is sickness care. It is medical care. If you actually go to them for something to support your health, they'll laugh at you.
Yeah, no, it's true. But the same is here in Canada as well. There is really no difference other than the fact that you don't have to pay out of your nose to get treated by a doctor up here, but you don't really get treated. The first choice is just to prescribe medication. If you say I'm going to switch to a plant-based diet, like the Gerson Therapy, you're kind of laughed at and you're told that it won't work. Whether we have socialized, medicine here in Canada and, and not in the States, really there's no difference though in how we're approached. And so here you are in China talking to these, influential people who could potentially, change the face of medicine in China. And, what were you saying? Is there 100 million people have diabetes in China?
100 million people with diabetes, 100 million people with arthritis, and a couple of 100 million people with hypertension.
Yeah. It's incredible. So here you are, you're meeting with them, you're, giving presentations, and they're open to it. They're open to using food as medicine.
And here's why. Well, I already talked to you about traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah. So they have a predilection for believing in nature's power to heal. Mm-hmm. But on top of it, the Chinese government also pays for the medical care. And And the pharmaceutical companies do not have the kind of strong, corrupt foothold here, in China as they do here or in Canada.
Right.
So the government is looking at their budget and they're seeing 100 million people with diabetes and how much is that going to cost us?
Yeah.
And 100 million more people with arthritis, how much is that going to cost us? And if we go with Western pharmaceutical medicine, we're looking at the USA and it's going down the tubes because the medical expense is going up and up and up, and the effectiveness is going down and down and down. So these people are actually interested in preventing disease because then they can keep these people productive and they can keep them paying taxes rather than being a drain on the economy. And this way they can pump more money into super speed trains and windmills and development of solar panels, and they're doing all of that, by the way, and even put it in their own pockets. I don't care. But they're not going to be spending it with on ineffective and dangerous, deadly drugs.
Yeah.
So
I love that you say about paying taxes because Dr. Abraham Hoffer, who's from Saskatchewan, he was a leading, medical doctor in Canada. I believe he and Max Gerson even knew each other, or at least they crossed paths. And
I don't think they knew each other. He was an associate. He was an associate of Linus Pauling.
Yes.
And so he and Linus Pauling founded the Orthomolecular Medicine Society.
Yes.
And Hoffer actually wrote the foreword to my book.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's where I first heard, I think, about Dr. Abraham Hoffer as well. And I loved his definition of health was, he worked with a lot of people with schizophrenia, and other mental health illnesses, and was able to use, high dose nutrient therapies and food and clean diet to get them healthy. And his definition of health was, he said, was when they can return to work and start paying taxes, which I just think is a beautiful definition.
I'm sorry, when they can
return to work and start paying taxes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the same thing, right?
We don't believe there is such a thing as mental illness.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no such thing as mental illness. What we have is physical illness, a chemical imbalance that manifests in the brain and causes dysfunction. Yeah. You clean up that imbalance. You clean up the poison, the toxins, the toxicity, and the mental disease goes away. It just goes away. So quick. So schizophrenia and manic depressive behavior and clinical depression, they just go away. Mm-hmm. So it's not a mental disease. It's a physical disease that when you start feeding the body correctly and giving it the amount of oxygen and oxidation enzymes it needs, then your brain will return to perfectly normal functioning very quickly.
Amazing. So you've just got back from China and you're running Gerson Media, and you interviewed me. We had an hour-long conversation, which I just had, so much fun chatting with you. You have all of these incredible interviews through Gerson Media that anybody can go on and, listen to any of the interviews you've done over the years. You've interviewed incredible people who are doing, you talk about the food desert. The one gentleman, remind me of his name, down in... Is it Virginia, Washington, D.C.?
Dr. Baruch.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever chat with him?
No, but I want to definitely interview him. You're actually, Howard, you are my first interview that I've done like this using Facebook. So now that I've nailed down the technology, we know how we're going to do it. I'm definitely he's next on my list. Because his story is incredible, and we don't have enough time to chat about it, but I just love the story of people coming in and getting their juice and having to pull out their handgun and put it on the counter to be able to get their change, in these food deserts, just to be able to get their beautiful organic pressed juice and food. It's a great story. So we'll put the link up to that because I want people to hear it. And also just to get familiar with Gerson Media and listen to those interviews because I love the work that you're doing. So now you're back from China. So what are your plans over the next few years? What projects are you working on, and what's on the horizon for you?
Well, my host over in China, is interested in starting a joint venture over there with me to provide Gerson therapy and Gerson clinics, the Gerson therapy, and the substances, the supplements, the devices, the juicers, the organic food, and so forth, to a country of 1.3 billion people. Okay,
that's incredible.
and like nobody is doing it. Nobody's doing it. But can you imagine if the government accepts that as a strong modality for healing chronic diseases? Oh my God! I mean, I talked to the right guy, the deputy director for chronic and non-communicable diseases. He's the guy for the whole country. And the reason they put him into the national position was he was in a regional position, and he did such a good job of improving the health of the people in his region that they said, oh, I want you to do this for the whole country. And he's sitting at the table with me and agreeing with me about everything I say. So, what an opportunity. What an opportunity.
Oh, and I can totally see Max Gerson rolling over in his grave right now, just being like, China, like,
really?
1.3 billion people. That's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. Wow. And so there's all kinds of initiatives going on over there that are and one of the things that Molly wanted me over there for was that I'm the first member of the Gerson family to come over there and talk about therapy.
Wow.
I'm not the first member of the Gerson family to go to China, because my niece, who is a world-class musician, a world-class violinist,
he's so beautiful. Her music is incredible.
Has been going over there for 4 years or 5 years and performing with philharmonic orchestras over there. So so it's quite a but I'm the first guy first from my family to talk about the Gerson therapy over there, and so I was treated. I was like a celebrity, like Brad Pitt or something.
Yeah, you know what? Like, honestly, like, I don't idolize any of these movie stars or anybody like that, but my one and only idol in this world, next to like the Einstein and the Gandhis and literally, is Max Gerson. If I had to build a shrine, his picture's going up on that shrine as well, because what he's done for science, even before like he was able to actually prove it, because the microscopes just didn't even exist to be able to, and the technology didn't exist to be able to see what he was able to directly see happening in the human body, like through observation. And I love that he used his body as a living laboratory. He tested it on himself. He taught. He was an educator. He was a doctor. He was a researcher and a scientist. Like, not a lot of people go to the extremes that he went to really test his theories and, to see them working and put them in action. And then on the side, having to fight off the AMA and all of these people who were coming after and saying,
and escape the Nazis.
And the Nazis, yeah, like, it's an incredible story. Like, read Howard's book and read everything you can about Dr. Max Gerson, because, like, he literally had to fight off the Nazis as well, and like had to flee Nazi Germany to be able to make it to New York, and then still had to battle the AMA, which some might say is equivalent of the Nazis. So, yeah, his story is epic. I can't wait for the movie to come out. It's going to be phenomenal. And, I think we're going to wrap up this interview because we can chat, I'm sure, forever, you and I. Like, I can hear you speak for eons. And this, project
Lost you.
frozen a bit.
I lost you there for a few moments.
Yeah, I lost you too, but we're back. So I just was asking if there's any, words of wisdom, and actually the only words that flow from your mouth are wisdom. So that you want to leave our viewers with when it comes to, if they are, let's say they are, not believing that the food is medicine, what sort of information do you want to leave with them so that they can hopefully start taking action today and not waiting till they hit rock bottom?
I will quote my grandfather directly: "Stay close to nature, and her eternal laws will protect you."
That's
And
beautiful.
that is, underlying not just food, but everything else in your world as well, from water to air to cosmetics to skin creams and preparations and everything else. Stay close to nature, and her eternal laws will protect you.
That's beautiful. Beautiful and so accurate. Yeah, because once you experience that, you can never go back. Like, you will never resist, fight against nature. You'll only want to work with nature from there on in. So Howard, you are an incredible human being. It has been such an honor to have you be our first interviewee on this show. I look forward to years and years of just you and I being able to converse and go back and forth. I look forward to more of your books coming out. I really hope to see that. You can write all about what it's like to influence China and get them to return back to those laws of nature. I can't wait for those projects to unfold, and we'll be updating our viewers on everything that you're doing as well. Everyone, please go onto Gerson Media, listen to Howard's interviews, get his books. We'll put the links up for those. And, if you need help learning how to eat to beat disease, how to use food as medicine, how to do the Gerson Therapy, you know where to find us, at The Green Mustache, at Richer Health. I'm sure you can get in touch with Howard Straus directly as well through his website. And you can learn directly from Max Gerson's grandson, this incredible man who's done incredible things in this world. And I'm really looking forward to, a continued long, vibrant life getting to know you, Howard.
Thank you very much. What a lovely, lovely honorific that you just gave me. So thank you so much for that. And I'm honored to be your first interview on this show.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you. It went really well. So I'll be sending you the link as well, and you feel free to use it anywhere. And we're going to be posting this. It'll go onto YouTube. It'll go onto Facebook, so you'll be able to access it as well. And yes, let's continue to chat, Howard, later in the future. And goodbye for now.
Goodbye.